Baby comeback. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we're talking potential reunions with former Minnesota Wild players.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we are your team each and every day. And we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, I've got three names that are former Wild players who could be available this offseason. We'll talk about whether they make sense for the Minnesota Wild, considering what the Wild are looking to fill in their roster. My name is Seth Topal, host of Locked On Wild, credentialed media member. And as we continue to maneuver through the offseason, plan is that we're going to take a little bit of a look at the Stanley Cup final coming up next week, just to see what the Wild can glean from these two teams. Obviously, build a better roster. We're going to dive in a little further than that, but we'll push that to next week since the series doesn't start till June 4th. We've got a little time to take care of that. I've wanted to do this for a while. I just wasn't exactly sure the best way to do it, but I've got three names today that are former Minnesota Wild players, whether it be via trade, whether it be via free agency. These three names are potentially available for the Minnesota Wild to look at this offseason. And I want to emphasize here, this is my general approach to any sort of free agency discussions or any sort of looks at players that could potentially be brought in. I go in blind because I want to form my opinion on whether a player would fit while we discuss. That's not to say, we're flying in blind, unprepared. I just like to kind of not have my mind made up so that I can make my mind up while we're discussing, as opposed to like having the preconceived notions as to how a particular player would fit on this roster. So we're going to start with a name that we talked about a little bit in yesterday's episode. So for the everydayers, I think, where we are headed here next. We're going to go to the Buffalo Sabres, and a player that we mentioned may be a little unhappy with how things went and how things are going, and that, of course, is Alex Tuch. Now, Tuch only played in 6 games for the Minnesota Wild right at the beginning of his career. He was brought in and then shipped out in the Vegas Golden Knights expansion draft. The Minnesota Wild were very keen on keeping Matt Dumba around, and so they dangled Alex Tuch to sweeten the pot so that the Golden Knights would not take Matt Dumba. So Tuch had 4 seasons with the Vegas Golden Knights. Then he was traded to Buffalo in the Jack Eichel trade. And he's had some pretty good numbers in Buffalo since he was acquired. In 249 games with the Vegas Golden Knights, he had 61 goals, 139 points. With Buffalo in 4 years, he's played 281 games. He has 106 goals, 137 assists, 243 total points. This past season, Tuch tied his career high with 36 goals. He played in all 82 games. He had 36 goals, 31 assists, 67 points, had a career high plus 16, and he had 3 power play goals and 11 power play points. So not a huge power play contributor. But what I do like, 196 shots on goal, shot 18.4%, played 19 minutes, 15 seconds per night. So It wasn't a career high in terms of time on ice, but it was right up there. He's been at 19 minutes or more the last 3 seasons. He blocked 113 shots, and he did take a good amount of faceoffs, slightly under 200, and he won them at a 41% clip. So mostly a wing, but he can play a little center as well. Average season for Tuch is 26 goals, 58 points over the course of 82 games. Now, metric I love to use, everydayers know this by now, point shares, indicative of kind of where a player's impact lies. Alex Tuch had 6 offensive point shares this past season, 2.1 defensively. That was a career high. So for a grand total of 8.1 point shares on the season. Oh, and he was 4 of 6 in the shootouts. What more can you ask for? Now let's look at where those numbers slot in amongst Minnesota Wild players. So let's start with the shots on goal. 196 shots on goal, 391 total shot attempts. 196 shots on goal is number 2 on the team behind Matt Boldy. Now, Kirill Kaprizov played in 41 games. You take his 41 and you take the 145 shots on goal he had and you double it. Well, that gets him to 290. And so that would be slightly behind. That would actually be first on the team. Boldy would be second, and then Tuch would be third. But still, third by a wide margin. Next closest is Ryan Hartman with 158. Total shot attempts, Kirill Kaprizov would lead this category by a mile. 622 if he played the full 82. Matt Boldy had 550. Alex Tuch had 391. So he would end up slotting in at third. Ryan Hartman was fourth with 300 total shot attempts. Now, as far as the goals go, Tuch leads by a mile. As far as points go, Alex Tuch would have been second on the team behind Matt Boldy. And as far as the point shares go, Tuch would have actually led the team in total point shares with 8.1. Matt Boldy had 7.5. Offensive point shares, Tuch would have led the team. Defensive point shares, he would have been just above Marco Rossi at 8th. So providing impact on both sides of the ice. He's very clearly unhappy with the direction that the Buffalo Sabres are going. He's a productive player. He's a very productive scoring wing, and he has played 74 games or more the last 3 seasons. Played 74 games at the age of 26, then 75 in 2023, 2024, and played the full 82 this past season. So injury concerns are minimal, and he has been relatively healthy throughout the course of his career. And he would slot in, I think, as a pretty solid second line addition for the Minnesota Wild. You know, you pencil him in. I don't know if he's necessarily a top line guy, but maybe what that allows you to do is to have Matt Boldy on the top line. Now, does it solve the glaring hole of a center on line 2? Well, Danila Yurov, I think, would have a thing or two to say about that. It would definitely fill a second line wing spot, and he's a player that clearly can let it rip from a shots perspective. And he's been at 192 shots on goal or more the past 3 seasons. He went 218 in 2022-2023, then 192 in 2023-2024, then 196 this past season. His shooting percentage 16.5, then 11.5, then 18.4. He's a career 12.4% shooter. So he's shooting pretty well above his averages so far this year, but he's only had 3 full seasons where he's been under 10%, and he was at 8%, 8.8, 8.2, and 8.6 in all 3 of those cases. Other than that, he's been, double digits from a shooting perspective. And, he's got some postseason experience from the days with the Vegas Golden Knights. He's a wild killer, so factor that in as well. This is something that I certainly would be open to looking at, more than open to. I would be in favor of this, depending on what the rest of the offseason plan looks like. As far as a contract goes, Alex is signed for this season at $4.75 million. So pretty affordable. He's an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season. And this is his age 29 season. So still tread on the tires. It's not a long-term commitment. So maybe you are able to offer a little less to pull him in. And so if, we've spent a lot of time looking at JJ Peterka, Tage Thompson. If nothing materializes in either of those cases, this would not be a bad fallback. And he's a guy that I think would be able to come in and add a much needed presence, a shooter's mentality up there in the top 6 to match what Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Boldy bring to the table. Honestly, if you go Kaprizov, Boldy on the top line, you move Zuccarello maybe to line 2 and you put Tuch as the wing opposite. That's a pretty solid top 4 as far as the wings go. And then you put Danila Yurov in the mix. You put Joel Eriksson Ek in the mix. You keep Marco Rossi, throw him in the mix. That's a doable top 6. So we're going to do a three-pronged approach in our questions for today's episode. If you're in favor of Alex Tuch, let us know below. We're looking at players that I think can bring a little something to the mix as far as reunions go. So Alex Tuch is a very intriguing one. We're going to move to a player who just saw his postseason end at the hands of the Edmonton Oilers. We're going to talk about Mikael Granlund as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving is 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. I call them my favorite guilt-free snack because I know if I have a handful or 2 or 5 that I am putting great nutrients into my body, and I don't have to feel guilty about eating something packed with sugars or other ingredients that you just don't want to be eating a lot of. Wonderful Pistachios are just such a great route to go for a healthy snack. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to join us on Sunday at noon for the latest in Denny's live shows. We will be talking about the officiating throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs, and Denny is going to talk about some of the things that Bill Guerin has done that he views as positives. So that's coming up on Sunday's show at noon right here on YouTube, the highlight of the week for sure. Continuing our reunion discussion, and we're moving now to a player who did spend a little more time on the roster, that of course being Mikael Granlund. Granlund spent 7 years all told, 461 games. He had 93 goals, 317 total points, and was a plus 32 to boot. He goes to Nashville, and he had 51 goals in 268 career games, 162 points in the 262 games. Then after that, he heads to Pittsburgh, then gets traded to San Jose, then gets traded to Dallas. And in the final 31 games of the season with the Dallas Stars, 7 goals, 14 assists, 21 total points in 31 games. He had 22 goals, 44 assists on the season, 66 total points in 83 games. Let's look at the peripherals. Granlund had 169 shots on goal, 326 total shot attempts this past season. That's up from what he did with the San Jose Sharks last year in 69 games. He had 134 shots on goal, 258 total shot attempts. Played roughly 19 minutes, 27 seconds per night this past season. And he won faceoffs at a 49.6% clip. He didn't play a ton of center with the Dallas Stars. He took just 50 faceoffs in 31 games. So he didn't play a ton of center, but he still mixed in for faceoffs. Kind of a Swiss Army knife type player for Pete DeBoer that he did not throw under the bus in the final press conference of the series against the Edmonton Oilers. Boy, if you missed out on that, DeBoer was talking about why he pulled Jake Ottinger 2 shots into the game because the Oilers scored 2 goals. And he said, well, it certainly wasn't all Ottinger's fault, but Ottinger had lost 6 of the past 7 games to the Oilers. So that's a pretty big sample size, which no, it's not. I digress. So Granlund is in his average season, 16 goals, 39 assists, 55 total points on the year. And this past season, he had 6.1 point shares. So just looking at how he slots in, 6.1 would put him just behind Marco Rossi for 4th on the team. Rossi had 6.3. Granlund, 6.1. Offensively, Granlund rocking a 4.2 on the season. 4.2 would have put him 4th ahead of Matt Zuccarello, just behind Marco Rossi. Defensively, Granlund managed 1.9, which would have tied him with Marco Rossi from a point shares perspective. And for Rossi, there just are a lot of parallels between what Rossi does and did and Granlund. But you know what you have at with Mikael Granlund at this point. He is going to be 33. And he's a player that can get you, steady production. He was brought in as a deadline ad by the Dallas Stars. They were able to slot him in based off of the depth that they have in their roster. They were able to slot him into kind of a lower pressure situation. He wasn't in a position where he had to be the guy. Now, he did play top line minutes with Roope Hintz and Mikko Rantanen while Jason Robertson worked his way back into the lineup. So he's capable of playing in a top 6 role, but I will say this. At this point in Mikael Granlund's career, I think he is much more of a middle 6 type player. He's still very productive, so I'm not taking that away from him. But at this point in his career, I think he is trending more towards a middle 6 player than a top 6 player. And 22 goals is 4 off of his career high. His career high was set back when he was 24, so it was 8 years ago, with 26 goals. He has not had a season in which he has eclipsed 20 since 2017, 2018, before this season. And games played all over the place, mainly because he too has been all over the place over the past few seasons. So this would be a free agent signing, because Granlund was in the final year of his deal, so he is going to be an unrestricted free agent. And, you know, would he be a nice depth piece that could add potential to play center, but also potential to play wing and kind of shift in between the two? Sure. But I would be hesitant for him to repeat what he did this past year, because let's also keep in mind he was playing in San Jose to start the season, and trying to get out of that situation, you know, there's a little bit of an uptick in the numbers. So I would be skeptical to see, you know, he pegs in more as like a mid-teens goals player. And how many of those do you need? Now, 16 goals on third line, that's great. That's great production. But this feels like just more of a logjam until the Minnesota Wild get that situation further clarified. And I forgive the pun, but it doesn't really make sense to throw another damp log on the fire when what you really need is just a nice dry log that's going to keep that fire burning for quite a long time. A damp log is going to just kind of tamper things a little bit. So I would say probably no on Mikael Granlund as far as a reunion goes. I'm very in on Alex Tuch. But there's another name who, again, very brief time in Minnesota, but it still counts because he was a former Minnesota Wild player. Let's check in on Ryan Donato as we finish today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Once again, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Reunion chatter. And we're checking in on a guy who actually was with the team when Dean Evison was coaching. Ryan Donato, who was brought into the organization from Boston. He played in 84 games total for the Minnesota Wild. He had 18 goals, 39 points, and played roughly 12 minutes per night on the ice, and had 14 goals in the 2019-2020 season as a 23-year-old. That was about the height of his powers, and he bounced around. He went to San Jose, then he went to Seattle, played in Seattle for a couple of seasons. He signed with Chicago, and his goal totals after leaving the Minnesota Wild: 6 with the Sharks, 16 in year 1 with Seattle, 14 in year 2, 12 with Chicago, 31 this past season with the Chicago Blackhawks, including 5 power play goals, but 26 even strength goals for the Chicago Blackhawks this past season. He had 182 shots on goal, shot 17%. That is far and away his career high, unless you kind of 12-game sample size to start his career with the Boston Bruins back in 2017, 2018, which we're not going to. 17% is far and away the highest shooting percentage of his career, and it also happens to come on the highest shots on goal he's ever had in a season. 336, also his highest shot attempts in a season. He played a career high 16 minutes, 19 seconds per night on the ice. He also did take roughly 500 faceoffs, but he only won those at a 44.6% clip and had 104 hits on the season. So Donato, one of the more productive offensive players for Chicago this past season. And this is really interesting as well. From a point shares perspective, Donato had a 5.6 point shares offensively. Now, where does that rank amongst Minnesota Wild players? Well, it is tied with what Kirill Kaprizov did in 41 games. He is tied with Kaprizov, 0.1% above Matt Boldy for the team lead. 6.9 would be third on the team behind only Boldy and Kaprizov, and Donato had a 1.3 defensively, which is respectable. It would put him just above Marcus Johansson for 15th on the team. But the 182 shots on goal, that would rank second on the team, 20 plus ahead of Ryan Hartman, and the total shot attempts would rank second on the team, a few ahead of Kirill Kaprizov. 25 ahead of Kirill Kaprizov as far as shot attempts go. So Donato would fit in, but the question with a guy like Ryan Donato is, do you buy it? Do you buy the offensive explosion? Or is this a player taking advantage of an opportunity? He's an unrestricted free agent. He's 29 years old. This is probably his last opportunity at a big payday. Are you buying Ryan Donato becoming a bona fide 30-goal scorer, or is this just a bit of a flash in the pan? Me personally, it kind of feels like a little bit of a flash in the pan, a little one-hit wonder, as it were, in the music world. A song that is a great hit, but you look a little further into that particular artist and you're like, oh, the rest of these songs are not great. So if it were me, between the three names that we talked about today, Alex Tuch, Mikael Granlund, and Ryan Donato, I feel as though one of those names has actual staying power. And again, let's say you sign Donato to like a 2 or a 3-year deal, and his shooting percentage trends more towards his career average of 11.1%. If you have a 3 or a 4% dip in shooting percentage from one year to the next, that's enough to get you into like the 20 goal range. That's enough to drop you 10 goals over the course of a season. And last year, as a 27-year-old, he shot 8.1% in 78 games. He's played 70-plus games the last 4 seasons that he has played. So, you know, this just kind of screams last real chance at a payday. Bad Chicago team with not a lot of offensive options. So this would be one that I would probably steer clear of. Mikael Granlund, if it was like the third move of the offseason behind a couple of others, I would probably be amenable to that. But I feel like Alex Tuch could be a good addition to try to bolster that second line wing spot. And then maybe in that case, you've got enough to elevate Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Boldy together while not having to worry about the rest of the lineup just going ice cold off the off the top of the map. Tuch was playing third line for the Buffalo Sabres. He played third line in the final game of the season for Buffalo with Jason Zucker and Peyton Krebs. So that's interesting for a 36-goal scorer. But it's going to depend on what else happens. I would say, and this goes for trades. This goes for free agency as well throughout the course of the offseason. Avoid the one-hit wonders, and it's pretty easy to identify those. Avoid the one-hit wonders. Try to find players who, have some equity builds and have put together some solid seasons, and you're going to get like a baseline of production as opposed to like huge swings from one way to the next. Alex Tuch has put in the equity. Now 36 goals, maybe not, but 20 plus feels like a pretty easy starting point for him to to punch that into the lineup. So if I had my pick of the three, it's Alex Tuch. So we'll see. Again, like I said, if you find that JJ Peterka and Tage Thompson, the talks, if there even are any, if you find that they're not getting anywhere, Alex Tuch might not be a bad pivot. We'll see what happens, though, but that is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Again, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.